Hello, beautiful people. If you're here, that means that Glacial Tarn might be on mutated dungeon rotation. Glacial Tarn is a level 65 expedition located in Great Cleave. This is an underground frozen complex hidden behind Imperium Forge with a connected story regarding the pursuit of Sir Loth. This is going to be a real-time walkthrough guide. At the start, we jump off of the platform and fall into the complex below. Ignore and run past these mobs here, avoiding the falling ice, and head to the stairs to fight the enemies by the first ice wall. You're going to take fall damage when you jump, but don't worry, you're going to be okay. Right now, you can see the fiery platforms on either side of this room. I'm standing on one. This is an important mechanic in the dungeon. The fire is called the Empyrean Flame and gives you a buff that allows you to remove ice armor from enemies. If you don't have this buff, killing an enemy with ice armor is going to take about 84 years, so when you see a platform, run over it to grab the buff because it does not last forever. The Empyrean Flame is also going to allow you to break down ice walls faster. After we kill this frozen reaver, we're going to need to break the ice wall and continue to venture deeper into the frozen complex. Make sure that you ignore any mobs in your way until you reach the next ice wall. A little pro tip is that you can triple roll through this ice mist to preserve your fire buff through it, otherwise it's going to take it away from you. This is going to allow you to take down the next ice wall quickly without having to grab more fire buff. You can tell someone has the fire buff because as you see around my waist, I am on fire. Okay, while we're killing mobs and breaking down the ice wall, let's talk a little bit more about the dungeon. Glacial Tarn is an ice dungeon, and as you can imagine, it's going to deal ice damage. If you feel like you're getting hit a little hard, there are a few ways that you can reduce ice damage. Probably the easiest way is by putting cut aquamarines in some of your gem slots. Pristine aquamarines are going to give you 6% less ice damage each as long as you put them in an armor or jewelry slot. Do not put them on a weapon slot for ice protection. If pristine gems are not in your budget, any tier that you can afford is going to go a long way in helping you take less damage. I also want to point out that this is an efficient Glacial Tarn run, so we're ignoring a lot of the mobs and only going where we absolutely have to go. You can get gold without killing everything as long as you don't have a bunch of team wipes. Run through the tunnel here, avoid the mobs and falling ice, then grab the fire buff and start to kill everything that moves. These mobs hit pretty hard, so having some ice protection is going to be really nice. To decrease ice damage, you can also wear an amulet that has frozen protection. This perk is going to decrease ice damage received by 15%. There is even an amulet called Heart of Cold that you can farm inside of Glacial Tarn to get this perk. It's from the named enemy Gellis, and it's from the part of the dungeon that we skipped before we went through this tunnel. He's behind an ice wall at the bottom of the stairs. Even if you don't put gems on your armor, just wearing an amulet is going to help substantially. Here there's a named enemy and an interactable pillar covered in ice. The pro strategy is to have 4 people deal with the named enemy while the 5th person on the team breaks down the ice and uses their Azoth staff on the pillar. Once that's done, a bridge is going to appear ahead of you and you can continue on to the next part of the dungeon. In a perfect world, a DPS will do the pillar bit because the named enemy hits kinda hard, so you'll want your tank and healer to be free to do their jobs. Once you cross the bridge, you're going to see some enemies with ice armor. Do not fight them, they're not worth killing. Just run past them to the first boss. If you stand inside of the wall where the first boss is, the mobs are not going to be able to enter it, and everyone can have a chance to make it in before you start the fight. You don't have to rush in and start right away. Do try really hard not to get hit by these ice enemies here because they are going to knock your teeth in. Alright, let's talk about the first boss. The first boss is an ice troll and, like the entire first part of the dungeon, is an ancient enemy. If you want to decrease damage taken, you can use an infused ancient ward potion which decreases damage by 10%. You could also use an ancient coating for your weapons to deal 15% more damage to ancient enemies. You should apply these before you start the expedition. If the boss does a little stompy stomp like you see there, a wave attack is coming. All you have to do to avoid being hit is to dodge forward through it. If you don't dodge correctly, don't worry, it's not going to kill you or even really hurt you that bad. Now you can see the boss spawning a large ice field in the room that's going to cover most of the floor. The ice field slows you and damages you over time if you're standing inside of it. It's not a lot of damage, but it does add up, and the slow will make it hard to dodge mechanics. If you're in the ice field, I recommend that you move out if possible, and if not, hopefully you have a really good healer. Right now you see the ice falling from the ceiling. This happens after the boss stomps the ground. You can see where they're going to land by looking at the floor. You should avoid these because they really hurt. You also just saw a symbol above my head and the boss run at me. The person who's standing farthest away from the boss when he does that mechanic is going to be the one that he charges at. All you have to do is just dodge out of the way. Even if you don't have the symbol above your head, you still can get hit, so make sure that you're not standing in the way. This charge really hits hard. The boss only charges one time during this mechanic when his health is above 50%, then when it falls below 50%, he'll charge 2 times in a row, so keep that in mind. And finally, if you see the boss drop down on all fours, he's not trying to have a good time. He's going to scream in the direction he's facing and shoot ice spikes at anyone standing there. The attack is indicated on the ground by a blue cone, so just roll out of it and you'll be fine. This also hits pretty hard. And that's it. A good way to summarize these mechanics is just keep moving, and dodge is your best friend. Unlike other expeditions, the Deep Freeze Artifact Ice Gauntlet comes from this boss instead of the last one, so good luck. After you slay the ice troll, it's time to start running again. There are a few ancient enemies right outside of the boss area, but we're going to ignore them and keep pushing forward. We'll get to a frozen lake and have to jump on the ice to avoid falling in while also avoiding the falling ice from the ceiling. If you go for a swim, try to get out quickly because the water is freezing cold and hurts a lot. Even just dipping your toes in takes a little chunk of your health away. After you get past the frozen lake, river, pond, whatever you want to call it, we're going to kill all of the ancient enemies by the respawn point. The pro strat is to have the tank pull everything in the room together and then start wailing on them. You have to kill the named enemy to progress with the expedition. Every time an expedition is mutated, it has an additional damage modifier. When I filmed this, Glacial Tarn was on ice mutation, which is great because then you only need to deal with 1 elemental protection. One thing that I did notice was a lot of people standing at range distance while we were killing named enemies, and they were slowly bleeding to death. Whenever you see us fighting a named enemy, you'll see a big blue circle around them. If you stand inside of that circle, you won't slowly bleed to death. Trust your healer and get cozy with the rest of your team. It's cold, share your body heat. Once again, we're doing a big pull. Run to the fire platform and grab your fire buff, then kill everything that moves. These enemies do have ice armor, so you'll need the fire buff if you don't want to take a ridiculous amount of time. These enemies have ice armor, so you'll need the fire buff if you don't want this to take a ridiculous amount of time. I will say that this part of the dungeon tends to get a little spicy. The mobs in this dungeon, especially the beefy ones with ice armor, tend to hit pretty dang hard, so big pulls can get sketchy fast. If you can pull everything at once, great. If not, don't feel pressure to grab everything. It's honestly not any slower to kill a few at a time, and you'll want to kill all of them in this part of the dungeon anyways. Plus, there's a respawn point, so if things happen, then you won't have to run very far to get back to the action. Just run over to the fire platform and do the best that you can do. As you can see, things got a little spicy over here, but we pulled together and made it through. So basically, what happens here is as a healer, I generate threat when I heal. If the mobs aren't aggroed by another player, they make a beeline for me. This part is scary because there's just enemies everywhere and it's honestly hard to keep them all aggroed. It's one of those things where it just is what it is. Stand in the middle of the heals and kill as fast as you can. Also, ignore what you just saw. I'm in a randomly queued dungeon, so don't mind any bickering and attempts to kick people. I don't know what's been going on recently, but there's been so much arguing in expeditions. Can't we all just get along? Anyways, now we're gonna run down the stairs and take care of the enemies there. There's also another interactable pillar covered in ice. Again, the pro strategy is to have 4 people fight and 1 person use their Azoth staff on the pillar. While we're fighting, another thing that I want to point out about mutated dungeons is that you get points for killing enemies and for gathering. Because you're not killing everything in a speedrun, you should be gathering everything along the way to pad the score to ensure a gold finish. You lose points for death and also for time if you take a long time to complete the dungeon. Okay, moving on. You don't have to grab the fire buff here because we're not going to actually kill anything in the next section. I just like to stand there just in case since I'm waiting for the door to open anyways. In this section of the dungeon, there are 3 platforms and 2 doors. In this section of the dungeon, there are 3 platforms and 2 doors. 1 person needs to stand on the first platform to open the first door. That person needs to stay on the platform to keep the door open. A second person should run through the first open door on the right side of the hallway and go stand on the second platform in there. A third person needs to run to the end of the hallway and wait for the big second door to open. Once it opens up, they should run up the stairs and stand on the third platform. Now all of the doors are open and everyone can run through and jump down to the next part of the dungeon. At the bottom of your jump, there's a respawn point and a named enemy. You guessed it, you're gonna need to kill them. One thing that I want to mention is that the door and platform part of the dungeon can get a little spicy because there are a bunch of unangered mobs everywhere, so just keep an eye on them and try not to get hit. If you do get downed, don't get mad at your team for not picking you up. If anyone goes back for you alone, they're probably going to die as well. Just respawn and run through again to join your team down below. One death is better than prolonging the dungeon or multiple people dying. Also, once you're in this part of the dungeon, the enemy type changes to humans, so if you want, drink your human ward and apply your human coatings. Now we're gonna jump across the rocks, run up the stairs, and fight the named enemy. Funny enough, I see more people die to falling in the lava than anything else in this dungeon. It's not even always their fault. Sometimes the game lags while you're mid-jump and you just kind of slide off of the rock into the lava. When this dungeon first came out in Season 4, I believe, one of the challenge titles was to get 10 flawless runs of Glacial Tarn done, and I'll tell you what, the lava ruined a lot of those flawless runs. After you dispose of Sir Roth, we're going to run across the bridge and straight into the big orange ball. It's not scary, it's a portal to the last section of the expedition. We are almost to the final boss. There are no more enemies between us and the final boss. This is just a big empty area, and I've always wondered if there was meant to be something else here and they just never did it. Anyways, gather the resource nodes and run over to face Sir Loth. The final boss has a lot going on, so I'm really going to try to explain it all while we're actually fighting it. I've got about 3 minutes to get all of this information to you, so let's see if we can do it. In the final boss room, there are 3 platforms connected by bridges. Sir Loth stands on a platform and his ice monster stands in the middle. If you fall off a platform, you will fall into the water and instantly freeze to death. Stay away from the edges of the platform. The person standing farthest away from Sir Loth needs to keep their eyes open. During the fight, they'll get a symbol over their head and then a ranged attack sent at them. There are 2 types of ranged attacks. One is a quick spear throw that will hit you and damage you and also knock you back, and the second one is an ice wave that hits anyone in its path. So try not to stand right behind your team so they don't get hit by the ice wave, and don't stand too close to the platform edge so you don't get knocked off. The ice monster has his own mechanics. Sometimes he will slam his hand on a platform like you see here. This will deal damage if it hits you. After he slams his hand, ice will start to fall from the ceiling. Their landing spots are indicated by blue circles on the ground, so don't stand there and you'll be fine. During the fight, as you can see here, the ice monster also breaks down the bridges. Do not stand on the bridges. After the bridges go down, there's a chance that Sir Loth will jump onto another platform and attack someone in the group. If he swings at you, dodge. He always swings twice. If he charges at you, move out of the way. He'll leave an icy trail behind him that you should avoid standing in. He only charges once. As you see here, the monster will also throw an ice bomb onto a platform. It kinda looks like a flower. If you don't kill it, it explodes and hits everyone on that platform really freaking hard. If you're on this platform, stop whatever you're doing and attack the bomb. Eventually, as you see here, the ice monster will stop moving and 3 green orbs are going to appear on it. At this point, Sir Loth becomes immune to damage. You have 2 choices. Either kill the mages or the green orbs on the ice monster. Doing either of these will make Sir Loth vulnerable to damage again. If you don't kill the orbs or the mages, the boss will gain in power stacks and hit harder and harder. If you have more ranged DPS, go for the orbs. If you have more melee DPS, go for the mages. Whatever you do, don't yell at your healer because they're not shooting orbs. They have to keep the tank alive, who will be getting hit harder and harder. Sorry, that was personal. If you rewind a little bit, what you'll see is the ice monster crossing his arms and blowing ice onto the platform where the tank is holding the boss. Everyone on this platform needs to move to another one immediately. You can rebuild broken bridges by standing near the edge of the platform where the bridge would be and pressing E. The ice platform deals a lot of damage to anyone standing on it and pushes players to the edge, so you really do need to move. And that's all of the mechanics. Unless the DPS is insane, you'll probably have 2 rounds of killing orbs. All of the other mechanics happen throughout the entire fight. One last thing that I want to add is that you do not have to kill the mages. They're going to spawn with a shield over them, and you can kill them when the shield goes down. Killing them will stun the ice monster, and it won't do any mechanics for a few seconds, but it's just not necessary. That said, a lot of times you'll notice that it is faster to kill the mages instead of the green orbs, so keep that in mind. It's a fun fight, but it can go wrong really fast, especially if the orbs and mages aren't dealt with quickly, or if the team isn't paying attention to the blow ice mechanic. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this guide helps you get your Frigid Dawn set or your Deep Freeze artifact. As always, like, subscribe, share, and most importantly, be kind to one another. See you next time, friends!